we will not allow you to sell coffee beans and soybeans and orange juice. That's pretty much how this conflict is converted into the terms of commercial trade. So from 1995 on, everybody had to amend their local laws so that they could guarantee minimum amounts of protection for everyone. And that's very interesting because this is a thing that people forget. For instance, Nigeria, which I talked about yesterday, this entire Nigerian film scene, which is the third largest in the world in terms of revenue, the number one in the world in terms of amount of movies being produced, was built in a time in which Nigeria simply did not have a copyright law. So when you think about this, you immediately realize that there is a fundamental flaw that is being discussed, which is the following. The assumption in the international sphere and the assumption on the part of the industry is that there cannot be cultural production or cultural creation without the incentives of copyright law. And this is really funny because if you take a look at the UNESCO Convention for Diversity, which is a very important convention that was approved 1 or 2 years ago, it's a convention that allows each nation to develop politics, even economic politics, in order to protect its local industry. And the United States refused to sign the UNESCO Convention for years. For more than 15 years, the United States said, no, we are not going to sign it, not going to sign it. And finally, they did 1 or 2 years ago. But the reason that they were refusing to sign is very funny. It was because they said, oh, you want to promote cultural diversity? It's easy. Just establish intellectual property laws. Because then people will be able to create, because you protect their creations, and then you have a lot of diversity. So they were making this direct connection between protection of intellectual property and cultural diversity, which is actually the very opposite in the 21st century. In the 20th century, it's another discussion. Before, technology and digital tools were not that democratized. I think actually copyright might have played an important role for distributing materials. But when you get to the situation in which the marginal cost of distributing a copy is zero, it doesn't cost anything to send a song for someone else, copyright is actually playing the opposite role, the role of preventing diversity and making it difficult for cultural production to really take place on a decentralized basis. So that's the reflection I was going to make. The indigenous culture that I mentioned before, it's just the same. So there are two. The theme of this session is after copyright. So I will change the little bit in two parts. It will be before copyright and then after copyright. So let me talk a little bit about before copyright. So these indigenous people that live not only in Brazil but in Australia, everywhere else, even in Europe, you have many indigenous groups which play by different rules even now. And it's interesting because the idea of copyright is completely foreign to them. So there was a very interesting case of a Brazilian shoe company that actually went to one of these indigenous groups and asked for permission in order to license a pattern for a new shoe. It's a very nice pattern, it's really pretty, and they wanted a license. They said, well, we want to make this shoe, so we want you to give the license. And then they went there, and they spoke with the association of the indigenous groups, which is an association formed by the young generation of this particular group. And they said, of course, no, you want the license, we can sign it for you. And then they made a contract in which 300 people were there signing. It's very funny, it's a long page, many pages contract with all the signatures. And then they launched this particular shoes. And 1 month later, they got sued by another guy, a member from that particular indigenous group. And then they said, well, but we got the permission, we have the contract here. And then the guy said, but not for me. I didn't give you the permission. Like the people who represented us, this particular group, they did not have a mandate by myself. And the reason I'm telling this story is because the idea of copyright is pretty much related with the idea of individual. So in our society, this problem has been solved because we organize ourselves as individuals. So if I create a work, I am the owner of the work, I can license it to you. But what in a society in which the very concept of individuality is not present? So what do you do in a society like this? How do you operate? Things get really, really complicated. So when you try to bring copyright into a situation in where you have an indigenous group, it's very complicated. It gets really, really messy because they simply do not operate by these rules, and they are actually a significant amount of people who simply do not have the common sense of what copyright is. If you go to Asia, it's pretty much the same thing. There's a book that I really like, written by Bill Alford. He's a Harvard professor. The name of the book it's about the Chinese conception of copyright. And they say, the title of the book is the following: stealing a book is an elegant offense. So stealing a book in the Chinese culture is not the same as stealing money. Because when you steal a book, you are actually trying to grasp the ideas that are embodied in the book. So it's a fascinating discussion, and it's a completely different perspective on copyright that we have. For instance, the idea of originality and authenticity is completely different in Asia than it is for us. One example is, for instance, Chinese vases, in which if you manage to make a perfect copy of a Chinese vase, it is considered an original. So that's a very interesting thing. If I get a vase and I make a perfect copy, it's considered to be an original version of that vase. Same for temples. There are many temples in China and Japan that were like destroyed among the wars, and they actually managed to rebuild the temple just like they were before. And if you ask them, is this temple the original one? They will tell you, oh yes, of course it's the original one. Look at this, it's the same temple. We rebuilt it just like it was before. So those ideas of originality, they are completely fragmented in different groups. And copyright is this imperfect system that only works for one specific form of organized society. Then this is for the before copyright. Now let's go to my final 2 minutes in which I talk about the after copyright. And it's the following. In Brazil and many other countries, there are situations in which copyright and intellectual property is simply not available. So, in spite of the fact that you have the TRIPS agreement, the WTO, in real life, if you travel to the north of Brazil, and if you talk about people, you know about copyright, they don't know, they don't care, and they don't want to know. So, one question would be, if copyright is a prerequisite for the creativity, so that would mean that if I go to these regions in which copyright simply does not exist, it would mean that people are not creating anything, right? They'll say, well, if they don't have copyright, why are they creating anything? And in fact, if you go to these places, this is pretty much precisely the most vibrant places in which the Brazilian culture and the culture in many other countries are taking place. So the people who had the opportunity to see me speaking yesterday, I described this in a deep and organized manner. I think you're going to post the video online, so I'm not going back to that here right now. But one thing that I would like to call your attention is when you have digital technology being appropriated by these regions in the world in which copyright has never been implemented, the results are extraordinary. It's really fantastic to see how like styles like the Cueto in South Africa, or the Kuduro in Angola are going on, or the Tecnobrega in Brazil, or the Cumbia in Argentina, or the dubstep in London, or the hip hop in Baltimore in the United States. These are all cultural scenes which are taking place in regions where digital technology are being appropriated by communities who do not care at all about copyright. That's something that I really think has to do with the future of copyright that might come. And it's really interesting because this future is actually happening now. As William Gibson likes to say, the future is already here. The only problem is that it's not evenly distributed. So basically, this future is already taking place in these regions, and we can already see it. So these are basically the considerations I'd like to make. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.